Welcome to the Powercat Podcast, the original K-State sports show. Here's your host, Tim Fitzgerald.
Good morning, everyone. It's Fitz and Big B and Wally today. I'm trying to retweet this and it's playing on my phone, so you're hearing an echo. Oh boy, I needed a night's sleep. I think my computer knew. Don't talk about this right now. I got the old scratch discs are full last night, Wally, and then I'm like, I can't do anything, and so I just start throwing stuff away. I'm probably missing important stuff, but it had to be done. K-State loses to end the regular season. Last night, 29-21 in Ames, Iowa, and we're going to break this game down for you. Hope you had a good night's sleep. I didn't, but that doesn't mean we're not going to put in the work today and discuss this and be really honest about what went wrong for Kansas State, not just in this game, but down the stretch, and really get into some of the issues we saw last night. And we'll even talk about Chris Klieman's postgame press conference, which I thought was very out of character for him and might be a sign that there's a lot of stuff going on that we don't know about. And I've told people about some of it, and boy, they don't like hearing it. They want to hear it, but then they don't want to hear it. First of all, Big B, let's start with you.
Yeah.
What was the biggest problem last night?
Iowa State was better than Kansas State.
Yeah,
that was the biggest problem. People may or may not want to hear that, but that was the biggest problem. Iowa State got a better football team than Kansas State. But digging in a little bit deeper, the offensive line played terrible. I mean, not bad. They played terrible. I mean, Iowa State wasn't doing – if everybody's been able to run the football on Iowa State all year long. I mean, they lost 100 million linebackers. People have been able to run the football whenever they wanted to run the football against Iowa State. All of a sudden, Kansas State can't do it. It just – and DJ's numbers look inflated because he had the one long run. People are going to look at just the stats and think, oh, well, it wasn't that bad. No, it was that bad, and pass protection was fine. I mean, until they blitzed. And anytime Iowa State blitzed, it looked like the Kansas State offensive line had never seen a blitz in their entire life, had no idea what to do. To me, that was the biggest problem. I will go back and take that back. The biggest problem is Iowa State's better than Kansas State. That's the biggest problem. But the offensive line, and you can even throw in the defense, because the one thing that you could count on the defense to be able to do is stop the run. And Iowa State ran the ball when they needed to run the football. That's the thing. Everybody, you can get runs here or there. You can break a long run and it inflates numbers because we can make stats look like anything. But when Iowa State needed to run the football, they ran the football.
Yep.
When Rocco Beck needed to get out and make a play, he was able to run the football,
yep,
which has been a problem for Kansas State all year, stopping a quarterback from being able to run the ball. It's been a problem all year long. But to break it all down, they were just the better team, the more physical football team.
Wally, you and I and Jay Heidrich, by the way, were on the same page last night. We were all thinking Iowa State looks like Kansas State used to look.
Mm-hmm.
I think I stole your line that they stole K-State's identity, and they did. That was a very K-State performance by Iowa State, and I meant it when I said after the game, congratulations. They were the better team. But that's a troubling thing if you're a K-State fan.
Yeah, I mean, like I get, and I got some pushback on X about that last night. And I understand from a wins perspective, Iowa State isn't doing what K-State has done. Not until last night had they ever had a 10-win regular season, right? They haven't won a Big 12 championship. There's a lot of things that K-State have done that puts them historically a level up from Iowa State. But if you're talking about kind of the here and now, where Matt Campbell has that program, and if you want to say kind of the trend that has been K-State, granted, Chris Klieman's got a Big 12 championship in there, but I just mean kind of in the way that things are going, it seems like Iowa State is the one that's been doing kind of less with more. It seems like Iowa State is the one that you never seem to question, like, what type of physicality you're going to get from them on a week-to-week basis. Motor. I'm not even just talking about this year. You can go back to last year too, and there were signs of this with Kansas State of, like, again, questioning like how tough they are. That never seems to happen with Kansas State. And lately it seems like it is. And so it just feels like there's Iowa State kind of playing with what's the word that I used in our text chain last night? They're like punching above their weight class. It seems like that used to be Kansas State. Like traditionally, all the people outside of the Big 12, when you used to ask, give me an adjective for Kansas State, it sure feels like lately, not historically, you could maybe point more of those towards Iowa State and not K-State. And I don't know if that's a good thing.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. I thought the team in some ways played really hard. I thought the defense was inspired until Big B mentioned it. They started giving up the run late in the game and really helped Iowa State ice it. The offense was imprecise the entire night. They just were. From the very first play, that was horrendously executed, and the play call worked, folks.
Oh my God.
It was a perfect play call.
A damn touchdown, Fitz.
It's a touchdown. But the players didn't execute it. Now you can say that's part coaching, but also I'm to the point now where it's gone beyond just a theory. These kids are getting paid. I'm sorry, I'm not going to excuse them for being college students. They're not hands off anymore. They're professionals. And Dylan Edwards was just in the wrong spot, doing the wrong thing. He got ahead of where his pitch point was, and Avery is trying to read. People, Avery is trusting Dylan's where he's supposed to be. He's reading the defender. And when he reads him, he turns to pitch, and Dylan's about a yard or two ahead of where he's supposed to be. Avery pitched the ball behind him, and it still went forward.
Yeah.
You're in the totally wrong spot, man. And I get it. Dylan looked downfield. He saw it. He saw what was ahead of him. But, man, you got to have the discipline and stay in the spot. That set a tone right there. And also the fact that they reviewed the play and, the entire TV crew goes, yeah, that went forward. Because if you look at where it pitched and where it landed, it went forward. Or where it hit Dylan's hand, I guess. It went forward. And they didn't overturn it. That set a tone too. It was just going to be that night, and it literally was. And Big B, K-State's just not precise enough. And anything they're doing right now, special teams is lackluster. We've seen breakdowns on the back end of the secondary all season long. How is Jaden Noel just standing all alone in the back of the end zone? Just standing between two K-State defenders who don't seem to give one crap that their best receiver is just standing there, and we're standing 2 or 3 yards away from him. Just things like that. This team, Big B, just wasn't precise enough all season to be better than 8-4.
Yeah. And I said this and people got on me about it. Maybe K-State just wasn't that good, and it's okay to say that that our peak this year was 8 wins. It's okay to say that. Doesn't mean that the season was a failure or anything like that, but doesn't mean that we can't be disappointed. But maybe the peak was just 8 wins, and that's all that this particular football team could get to. And look, the talent, we can say that the talent was there, but when the talent on a consistent basis isn't producing, you can say, well, it's the coaching. Okay, I buy that. But also you can say, well, maybe the guys just aren't as good. And again, that's okay to say, because you can't just constantly be, well, the coaching is bad, the coaching is bad, the coaching is bad. Sooner or later, if you're really talented or you're talented enough, regardless of what you're being coached, you're just not going to let a guy stand in the end zone by himself. You're just not going to let a guy run through you or past you or juke you. You're just not going to allow some of these things to happen if you have the talent, because regardless of what people say, talent rules the day in college football. Professional football is a little bit different, but in college football, if you got more guys, that's what we always complain about, is that Kansas State doesn't have the same kind of athletes. Well, college rules the day. So sometimes it's just, we're just not as good as somebody else. That doesn't mean that you don't like K-State. That doesn't mean you don't love K-State. That doesn't mean that you're bad-mouthing the football players or the program or anything. It's just being honest and saying, just not that good. And it's okay. Or I don't even want to say not that good, because 8 wins isn't terrible. It's not terrible. It's just not what we wanted. It's not what we expected. But sooner or later, it's got to be at the point, Fitz and Wally, that we just got to say, hey, 8 wins, this is what it is. Because every week it can't continuously be, well, the coaching stinks and we're never getting this, we're never getting that. Sometimes you just max out, and I think this Kansas State football team in this regular season, they maxed out.
Well, I'm going to let Christian ask you, wouldn't you agree in Week 12 everything boils down to coaching?
Okay, so I was going to piggyback, and this goes kind of hand in hand with what Christian's talking about a little bit, and piggyback for a minute off of what Big B was just saying there. And I'm going to single out one player just because I think a lot of what has gone on with this one player in a way kind of sums up the questions, like things aren't adding up, right? And from a program standpoint, let's take the curious case of Trey Spivey. So you have Trey Spivey. Before the year, we hear about how they want to get guys like him more into the offense, or maybe it's a defensive player, integrated into the weekly game plans, and try and utilize their strengths. Well, then that doesn't happen. And, it's like, here we are, guys like me that are saying, why isn't Trey Spivey on the field when there are guys ahead of him that clearly aren't cutting their weight, so to speak. So then they put Trey Spivey on the field, and you had instances like last night where, clearly he's not on the same page with Avery Johnson. And I'm tweeting out that shouldn't be happening this late in the season.
Nope.
Well, in my direct messages, I get some pushback from some people that would know more than me that are saying, well, maybe Trey still doesn't know everything that he needs to know when it comes to the playbook.
That's exactly right.
Which is fair. But then we go back to, well, then again, why is he on the field then? Because he wasn't on the, we're not putting him on the field because he doesn't know the playbook. That was what we were hearing in the first half. Now he's on the field, and when he's messing up, it's, well, he still doesn't know the playbook. He doesn't know all these things. Well, then why is he on the field? Well, then it's like, well, then you're telling me then that tells me there's nobody behind him then that you trust. So the guys above him weren't getting it done. He won't get it done, but you also won't pull him because there's nobody beyond him that you like. And so then it goes back to all the stuff we're hearing about depth, and you're scared to rotate guys in. None of it makes sense. None of it makes sense. That means, if you want to boil it down, then that means your evaluations are off. Your recruiting is off. There's a lot of that kind of thing, and not at every single spot, but, I look at Trey, and again, that is what doesn't really add up. And to me, that does kind of go to coaching. And yeah, maybe you fault Trey. You've been in this system now for what, a year and a half, 2 years now. And if you're still struggling, yes, like Big B said, that isn't on coaches. Trey, you gotta buckle in and figure this stuff out. But then at the same time, there's got to be kind of a balance there that we're not getting at the final game of the regular season. It's bewildering to me, Fitz, why no matter how you want to answer it, it doesn't look good either way.
I agree. I see this comment here from John Meese, isn't that coaching? It is. At the end of the day, think about how many times players on the field were doing the wrong thing, and it was obvious to anyone who knows football but doesn't even know the play or playbook that guy's not in the right place. You can tell. I mean, once in a while, someone to be standing there in zone while the defense is man. Just all season long from the very start. And for all of you that are, frustrated about 8-4, I want to get back to what Big B said. Maybe this team just isn't good. Let's be really honest here. They should have lost at Tulane.
Yeah,
they should have. Tulane played better. And they probably got bailed out at Colorado by one big play. That big play came with a price because someone made a huge play, and then it changed how they were in the locker room. But I got to tell you,
Fitz, they should have lost to KU. I mean,
they should have lost KU.
Let's add one more on there.
I'm telling you, folks, these players didn't execute at a very high level. And this is what's disturbing to K-Staters. They haven't seen this before since Ron Prince was coach. That players aren't doing the right things. They're not. There's no attention to detail. And it's easy to push the players under the bus, but when it's kind of roster wide, you're like, what the hell's going on in practice?
Yeah.
let's go. And I want to bring this one up, Big B, because I think this is a very fair comment. Silver Bullet, agree, Big B, but this panel put me up all year that this was the deepest roster ever, and it should have been.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, talent-wise, it was. I mean, Wally was all over it. He's 100% right. Talent-wise, this was a super deep roster. Now, if you can't learn plays and you can't learn the playbook, I don't care how talented you are. That doesn't matter. And it seems like we have some of that going on.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that just is what it is. And then the coaching aspect of it, too, can get in the way. I've said this from day one. I think the offense needs a completely overhaul on the type of offense that Kansas State is running. It just does. The way that they're trying to do it, and I'll just call it the North Dakota State way, and bringing that offense down, that's just not going to cut it here. And you can say, well, we won a Big 12 title doing it this way. We also had NFL guys on that roster, a lot of them. Do we have a lot of NFL guys on this roster? I don't know. Maybe we do, maybe we don't, but I'm guessing it isn't as many as what you think. But, yeah, it is a deep roster. But if guys are still not in the right position, number one, it's on them. Number two, it comes down to coaching. So you can be super talented, but if everything still isn't in line, man, it makes a difference. And when you're not – and maybe we could also have made a mistake too. Maybe we overhyped what the talent is, and we can be wrong. There's nothing saying that we can't be wrong about what we see. I think that's being honest and being fair, that we can be wrong too about maybe how good some of these guys actually were. So that's a fair question. I love the question, but it just didn't work out. And everything that's going on, it just didn't work out. And, again, how talented you are, there seems to be some locker room stuff going on. It just wasn't a great year for the Kansas State football program.
I want to take some ownership here. Wally, I'm at fault more than anyone else for maybe overselling Avery Johnson. Now, I want to say I think Avery's a spectacular kid, just a great young person. But he was a true sophomore, and he played like that at times. But if you go look at his stats, he did not have a bad sophomore season outside of that turnover issue. And that's really, again, back to the team's troubles, precision. Too many turnovers, and that is often a lack of execution. We go back to the interception on the Keegan Johnson pass play. What game was that, Wally? Where he rounded off his cut. He started looking like he's going to the post. Houston. And that was just imprecision. That they just didn't. Avery's expecting his receiver to be in a different spot. He's throwing to that spot and didn't get there. That is imprecision that cost his team so much. If you do a fair analysis of Avery's stats, that was not a bad season. But when you start a game with a turnover and you have a turnover in the first possession, which happened in a number of games, that's costly. And Wally, I think he's going to be a great quarterback. He's just needs further growth, more growth than I imagined, and it is my bad. I should have taken into account better that this is just a kid. Yeah, and he played like it at times.
Yeah, and I mean, last night was not his strongest performance of the year, and I've been as big an Avery supporter on here as anybody, and last night was not good. He just kind of looked deflated, didn't look like he had any real feel for the game. And again, and this doesn't mean to sound like an excuse for Avery, but you do kind of wonder how much of last night was just him kind of being tired of what the season became.
Yeah.
Scrambling for his life because the offensive line isn't blocking, also not being able to scramble probably the way he wants to, or not scrambling at all, as we were talking about, like wanting him to take off more in his, maybe just not looking as healthy as he normally is. Last night just felt like one of those where Avery was just kind of like, get the season done with. And I'm clearly that's not the type of attitude he has, but it looked that way. Right. But Fitz, to your point, it's like a lot of the things that, for as many of the things that we're going to say Avery kind of, fell short of. I still think there's a lot of growth that can be made from this, because I mean, like, the biggest knock on him coming into college was like his deep ball, and I thought for the most part he threw a pretty good deep ball this year. When he's healthy, he runs just as well, as we all expected him to. I think a lot of those other things are going to come along, but I also think that they've got to get the offensive line to execute, and the receiver issue is something that really drives me nuts, because what kind of passer, or what does Avery Johnson look like? Let's start with better pieces, and I'm not even saying the Will Howard like Ohio State pieces. Let's be realistic here, but he's got Jace Brown, and Jace looks like he can be a guy, but who else besides Jace Brown was there this year for Avery Johnson to, quote, look better? I mean, that receiving core wasn't at all what we thought it would be. But then I also go back kind of in Avery's defense, and going back to kind of what Big B was saying in terms of the offensive strategy and the mindset here is, let's go back to last night and the offense that we saw Iowa State have. They don't have Ohio State players. There's nobody like glitzy and glamorous on that Iowa State offense. You've got Jalen Knoll, who's from Park Hill down the street here in Kansas City, that I was on the table for as a freaking sophomore at Park Hill. And he goes out and does what he's doing at Iowa State. Could have been yours, K-State, but I digress. And then they pick up Higgins, who's a transfer from Eastern Kentucky. Both of them are 1,000-yard receivers. And Fitz, we talked about it in the pregame show. That's all they have. They've got the Carson Hansen kid. They've got the Sama kid. But as we said early on in this very episode, they haven't been running the ball well this year at Iowa State. So, again, this was an offense that week in and week out, you knew who they were throwing the football to. And neither one of those guys is going to be a first-round NFL draft pick or a second-round NFL draft pick, probably not a third-round NFL draft pick. But they found ways for that offense to work where both of those guys are 1,000-yard receivers with Rocco Becht at quarterback. So it's like long-winded way of saying, like, they've got to do a better job of figuring out what pieces they have and kind of molding an offense to that. And I think in turn, you're going to see Avery Johnson be closer to the Avery Johnson than we all think he can be. And we're going to see an offense that should and can execute better. None of it was good. I mean, Avery wasn't great this year, but the line wasn't good. The wide receivers weren't good. The offensive strategy wasn't good, Fitz. None of it painted a good picture for anybody on that line, on that side of the line of scrimmage.
Yep, I agree with all that. And I agree that people can and should be frustrated. They need to vent. But Big B, nobody, Coach Klieman, these people saying Chris Klieman should be fired. Come on, man. Look, I know you're upset, but man, I hope you don't have a boss that's that emotional as you would be as a boss. It wasn't a good performance. It was a shitty ending to a season. Losing 3 out of 4 was inexcusable, because I'm going to say it, all 3 of those losses in some way were very self-inflicted, whether it's turnovers, bad play calling, imprecision from the players' execution, having the wrong footwear again at Houston, which I swear to God happened. I mean, the program is missing details right now. And as much as they brought in, this is kind of a wild point, Wally, I think you'll appreciate it. They brought in Clint Brown to help manage the roster, manage the portal, manage recruiting, help that. They really need a true analyst that's just in charge of cleaning up details. Here's what we screwed up. I go back to this, Big B. Paul Dunn, former offensive line coach at Kansas State.
Mm-hmm.
Loved the man, and he wasn't here very long, but he told me a story once about his first practice at Kansas State. His first practice at Kansas State, and I hate going back to the old man and talking about how incredible Bill Snyder was, but Paul said, I got back to my office, I sat down, and there were pages of handwritten notes from Bill Snyder about what my position group needed to work on. And he said, the man had been walking around the entire practice. He didn't spend his entire time watching my group, and yet he nailed everything. Now, Bill Snyder had a gift for all of that is rare and hard to replicate, but you can find some people that will drill down and say, let's just say this. The running back is consistently in the wrong pitch point. The quarterback's footwork is this. Everything should be on the table. This team was so imprecise, Big B. There probably needs to be some changes. And there needs to be, as I said on the Power Talk, some serious soul searching from this coaching staff about what they're doing and how they're doing it.
Yeah, I mean, look, anytime you underperform, and again, 8 wins, I keep going back, it's not a failure, but you can still say that they underperformed. There needs to be changes. You can't just always go with the status quo. I understand that Kansas State is a family. I get that. The program, the fans, we're all in this together. But you know what? If somebody's not getting it done, at some point in time, you have to be replaced. It's the same way with players on a football field. If the player isn't getting it done, are you just going to keep letting them go out there and not get it done? Coaches have to have that same responsibility. And I know people get so mad and bent out of shape because players get paid. Well, cry me a river. Coaches get paid too, and coaches have been getting paid a whole hell of a lot longer than football players. And I get it. But you know what? You got to go out. If your position group, just like any other job, and I know that it's not a regular job, but it's still a job. And if you go to wherever you go and you work and you don't get it done, they replace you without even thinking twice. So things just have to change. And on the offense and the defensive side of the football, and where and how you change it, I don't know. I mean, I have an idea, and I'll just say this because I've said it to you guys. We wasted Matt Wells even being here. Yeah. I don't even know why he's here, to be honest with you. I mean, what's he doing? This guy's a former head coach, a former offensive coordinator. I mean, he's an offensive mind, and you had him here doing what? To try to work on Avery and help Avery? Well, I'm sure in the back of Matt Wells' mind, and again, I'm not trying to bring up any conspiracy. This is just me talking. He's like, why did I come here to do this? I don't need to come here and do this. I need to be calling the plays, designing an offense around this young man, not trying to have him fit into whatever we're trying to do. No, we got this kid. We have this superior talent. Well, let's use them in the right ways. And it just didn't seem like that was happening. The same thing on the defensive side of the ball. We talked about, how the defense and a lot of the depth. Last night, we were invisible to or allergic to pass rushing, like literally allergic to pass. Nobody got any pressure. We couldn't do anything as far as pass rushing last night. It was absolutely unbelievable what I was seeing out there. Well, at some point, you got to make a change. Somebody's got to do something. But is it the technique? Is it the scheme? Do we need just better players? All of it needs to be overhauled if we're trying to get to where we're trying to go. That is the ultimate goal. It can't just be, well, we want to be loyal because we love this guy. Okay, great. But are you wanting to win? Because to me, just go win. Doesn't matter who. It could be a field mouse out there. If the field mouse can stop the run, put him out there and let's get it going. But again, I'm getting emotional and I apologize.
Nope.
I just see so many times where we just won't do the things that we need to do.
Well, let me piggyback off that another one real quick. Where I talked about the case of Trey Spivey. Big B brought it up there again, kind of with the defense. Let's go to the defensive side. Again, like none of this kind of makes sense to me. Where I think it was the opening touchdown. You have Higgins that goes wide open, just runs right past the safety, Jack Fabris. Yep. And I see, on X, everybody's like, why are we matching a safety up one-on-one with their best receiver? Well, if you go back and watch the play, you can see Jack Fabris trying to talk to VJ Payne, trying to get a hold of Keenan Garber. Like, is this where I'm supposed to be? Is this? He never did get an explanation. His hands are like this as the ball's being snapped. And then Higgins goes past him. So then you go, well, like, how does Jack Fabris not know what he's supposed to do? How can these guys not answer him? Why is everybody not on the same page? And it goes back to what Big B was saying. You kind of start faulting the coaches for their loyalty to Jordan Riley because Jordan Riley played freaking 9 weeks. Like if Jack Fabris had been inserted a little bit earlier, maybe he gets more comfortable in those situations. Maybe there's a design there that he's like, I know where I'm supposed to be. You can't, always fault the younger guys for not knowing where they're supposed to be and what they're supposed to do when you never give them kind of leverage and more snaps to improve. We just talk about the great spring they've had, or the great fall camp they've had. And then we expect them to go out and, turn it on in a game in the fall. It doesn't make sense, which, and this will uncork a whole nother topic, but, we don't have to get into this, guys, but it is bewildering. Again, I'll use that word, how it seems like Kansas State always seems to have these issues with like freshmen, redshirt freshmen, sophomores, but yet every other team in the country plays freshmen and sophomores all the time.
Don't get me started.
And they're like some of the best players on their team. So anyway, that's a whole nother thing, but yeah.
You're 100% right. I've said it from the very beginning. Kansas State is a developmental program and this and that, and I understand you're going to have a lot of that, but don't tell me you can't go out there and get freshmen that are capable of playing right away. Everybody else does it. And, oh, by the way, all those guys that are out there playing as true freshmen, all of them aren't 5-star football players either. So before we get into, those are 5-star guys that we'd never get those. No, they're all not 5-star guys. That is absolutely not the truth. Kansas State can do that too. Go start recruiting some kids that can go help you right this very second. If you needed to plug them in and play tomorrow, that you could do that. Kansas State is capable of doing that. They just are. And again, those don't have to be all your 5-star football players. You don't have to go recruit a bunch of developmental guys. You don't have to do that.
Fitz, I'll slide in real quick and throw it back to you. Again, piggybacking off Big B, we talked about Iowa State last night. A lot of guys on that defense were playing as freshmen or sophomores.
Yes, they were.
Guess what? That was the year that K-State and everybody else in the Big 12 was pointing the finger at Iowa State, saying, Matt Campbell sucks. This team sucks. They're going downhill. Go back and look at that team. It was a ton of freshmen and sophomores. And guess what? All those guys are seniors, fifth years, juniors, and look at them now. They're 10-2. Sometimes you got to roll with the young guys, and it ain't going to be pretty. But if you roll with them long enough, they're going to improve, which is kind of what we were saying about Avery Johnson. Give it time, but also maybe let some of those young guys play a little bit earlier. And for whatever reason, K-State refuses to do it.
This is the Powercat Postgame Podcast. It was supposed to be last night. Didn't happen. And I'm glad we waited. I think we all needed some more time to absorb that and maybe get out of our emotions. I'm trying to track the chat over here, the questions in our comment section, and they're kind of all over the place. I want to throw this one up because KNet did a couple super chats. I'm going to just use this one, KNet. I appreciate it so much. This is bothering me. We keep running plays when the box dictates you run the opposite thing. I've seen this team run into stacked fronts over and over and over. And Kane mentions the genius of Bill Snyder. One of the things, this is going to get kind of weird. One of the things that always fascinated me about Bill Snyder is I think we can all agree he was the ultimate control freak, right? Mm-hmm. He wanted everything in his control. And yet he let a quarterback decide at the line of scrimmage if we're going to run or pass, because they had that power at the line of scrimmage to make that decision. Count the box, we need to pass. Count the box, we need to run. Sometimes it was that simple. Sometimes you needed Justin Swift to stand up at tight end and tell Michael what to do. But there was a system there, and that's how important it is. That's how important the box is. Bill Snyder left that to a kid to decide, not his offense coordinator, not himself, a player on the field. And I feel like this team kept running in to the teeth of the defense or passing in to the strength of the defense. And it just didn't work. You can't do that, period. It's not about not working. It won't work unless you're the Bears.
Look at the steam. Look at the steam coming out of Big B's ears. I think if you look close, you can see it.
I don't want to get mad on here because people are going to start to hate me. But at the same time, you guys know me. I'm going to be as honest as I'm just an honest guy. Look, some of the scheme stuff, it's just counting. It's not like it's rocket science to figure out which way to run a football. It's just counting. And all you have to do is, where's our strong side? Let's count the numbers. Oh, we got them outnumbered. Let's run it that way. If not, we run it the other way. you know what? If they got too many guys up here, we're going to throw the ball over your head. It's not that difficult to figure out. And it doesn't seem like a lot of that is incorporated into this offense. I mean, heck, how many times are we going to have our tight end being the guy that's running the shallow cross? I mean, in no offense is the tight end the guy that's running the shallow cross. And that's not a knock on our tight ends either, because I think all of them are phenomenal. But they don't have the foot speed to be able to do what a shallow cross is literally designed to do. So I'm like, why are we doing this? And we constantly do that. And it's some of the stuff, it just needs to be overhauled. That's it. It just needs to change. And that's okay. It's okay. It doesn't mean that we're a terrible program. But if you're not getting better, then you're getting worse, because you never stay the same. That's not what a football program does, or anything in general. Either you're getting better or you're getting worse. So you got to continue to just try to stack up those good days. I know that's a silly cliche. But it is the truth. And K-State just needs to overhaul stuff. They just do. And that's okay. Does it mean that you're probably going to lose some guys? Probably. But you know what? Everybody always talks about what's wrong with the K-State program. Guys are transferring, blah, blah, blah. People transfer from the best program or whatever is perceived to be the best program in the country. They do it all the time, and it is what it is. But you know what else is allowed? Kansas State is also allowed to go get guys. People just say, hey, okay, we're just going to leave Kansas State and nobody comes back. You're allowed to go to other programs and get those players, but you also have to attract them. And if you're going to attract them, you have to do things that are going to attract kids. Whether we like it or not, we have to do things that are going to attract kids. And a lot of that, the uniform type of stuff, I think that's part of it, but that's secondary.
Right.
You got to get a system in place where I can showcase my ability. And right now, if we're being honest, I don't know that we necessarily have that, especially on the offensive side of the football. We just have to change things, and we got to be better. That's all. That's all. And I sound like it's so simple to do. I'm not saying it's easy, but you know what? Those coaches get paid a hell of a lot of money to go out and figure this thing out. So that's part of the job now. It's just required.
Agreed. Wally, there's some people saying that there'll be mass entries into the transfer portal off this roster. I don't agree with that. It might be a number of guys because they're not playing. We've already seen that with a corner. But I've also come to believe the transfer portal can be cleansing. I mean, you go back to the 2020 season when things went off the rails with everything going on with the pandemic and society, and those departures made this program better. And I'm not saying that anyone in particular in this on this roster needs to go or should go, but it's not a bad thing, folks. However, Wally, you have to turn around and bring in more tangible players from the portal, and they haven't been. They've been bringing in role guys. And Dylan was kind of the biggest splash guy they've had. Keegan Johnson was kind of there. But you talked about this. Some of K-State's best players have come up from FCS or smaller schools, just like the receiver at Iowa State you mentioned. That's Chris Klieman's formula. Don't go to New Mexico to get a linebacker. Go look at the FCS ranks. Go find that dude. You coach this level. There's dudes all over that level that can play at the power level. They might have needed a couple years to get there, but they're there.
Right.
I feel like that's where K-State's coaching staff needs to really delve into the portal. Find those guys, say, we're going to give you a chance at this level. I recognize you. And again, I just don't think they had impactful transfers on this team that made a difference in a positive way.
Well, and let me go long-winded here. I'll try not to be too long-winded, but let's get back to, again, kind of this season, right, and how it finished. I thought back about this last night after the game, and I don't like to fault effort sitting on my couch, like guys like Big B that are in that locker room that are, icing up and stuff like it. I hate being the guy that's like, man, it doesn't look like they're giving it their all, because clearly Chris Klieman believes that they are. And I feel like he would pretty much tell us like that was a crap showing from us, like as a motor and physicality and all that. And he hasn't said that. But at the same time, it sure seems like if you look at this big picture this season, I questioned a little bit at times the second half of the year. How many of those games did we leave, whether K-State won or lost, saying, man, it sure felt like this team left everything out there, and either they won or they lost. I think at the beginning of the season, even in the Tulane game where they lost, you could say, man, they fought. They fought. Colorado, they won that game, and man, they freaking fought that game. But you start looking like KU, Arizona State, Cincinnati, I think, was just bad. They did look like they had some life there last night. Like, do we feel like they really gave it their all? Okay, knowing what I said there, getting back to what Fitz is talking about, who is the most impactful transfer we think they had in this last class, which was not a very impactful class? It was Easton Kilty, who really didn't live up to like the expectations probably, but albeit he was probably the best transfer that they had. Again, you can make the case for Dylan Edwards if they used him better or what have you, but we'll say Easton Kilty. I think about guys like Reggie Stubblefield, and you go back and to Fitz's point, and to an important piece that Big B brought up here is, and again, I think fans are going to be disappointed. We want them to get better at, let's say, receiver. You're not going and getting any star receiver because they're going to go and look at what this offense has been, not just this year, for years. When was the last time K-State had a 1,000-yard receiver? You don't think that's going to get brought up in the transfer, politics of everything? It will. They're not going to go get a star receiver. They're just not. But where they could convince a guy is somebody moving up, somebody who just wants a chance at the big stage. And while everybody else is busy plucking and picking off G5s and Power 4s, you can go get the FCS guys. You can go get these other guys that are just hungry, that will give you and leave everything out on the field, that will come in and not overlook stuff about the locker room because, they were lucky to get hot water at their old facility. And K-State and Chris Klieman are going to love those guys because it's all stuff that's within here. Has nothing to do, where's my camera? Nothing to do with money. They also are not going to have to, with the portal guys, getting into recruiting, in depth here, insight stuff. Like the portal window is so fast and furious. You don't have a chance to get to know guys. You don't really have a chance to go in and do in-home visit stuff. You got to kind of work fast. And I think sometimes when you're trying to work fast and work with the money, with the Power 4 guys and the G5 guys, K-State kind of gets left behind. They want a more thorough research process. You can have that and not overspend with your FCS guys. And I think Fitz, that to me, that's where the bread and butter would be if I'm K-State. And it won't be the most glamorous class. It's not going to be ranked very high probably, but you have a better chance of stuff like last night and stuff like this season not happening if you go that avenue. I was talking with somebody who knows a G5 roster quite well, has somebody connected on a G5 roster. And they were telling me just last week that the guys that they picked up out of the transfer portal this last year in the offseason that were guys that came down from the power levels are some of the biggest drama cases that they have in that locker room. And none of them have panned out. And the guys that have are the guys that were developed from the high school ranks or guys that they elevated from the FCS. And those have been their best playmakers this year. To me, if I'm Chris Klieman and K-State, I would go that route. It fits their blueprint. And then, like Big B said, then once you figure out and you can show maybe some of the bigger name guys, hey, this is our system. Look at what we can do. Then you can go out and start getting some of those guys. But right now, I think Fitz, long-winded, you're right on the nail with it. I think go get some guys that are proven commodities at the FCS levels and that are hungry, that aren't going to, have the locker room issues and the on-field issues that we saw strike this team late in the year.
Okay. You guys know me. I want to think of solutions and not just bitch. Number one, I would like this program to enforce a rule. If you mention the NIL outside of a private meeting with your position or one of the main coaches, the head coach, certainly, there's a consequence. If you mention it in practice, you're running. If you bring it up in a meeting, you're running. These kids got to learn Business belongs when business needs to be discussed. That's business. You're hired to do a job. Go do the damn job and quit complaining about your contract. The NIL has to be managed in a disciplined way because, look, it's happening in every locker room. I need more touches so I can get more NIL. There's nothing in that sentence that helps the team win. Not a damn thing. And if that's fostered and allowed to happen, it's like a mold. It's just going to spread. Also, I'd like to see, this is really dopey, but I'd like to see every player write down 3 things that they should be doing better with the help of their coaches, because they might have input on that, and put that up on their locker so they have to stare at that damn thing every day. I need to continue to pay attention to my routes. I need to do this, whatever. I don't care. And for the coaches, if I'm Chris Klieman, when I talk to you tomorrow, I want 5 things that you need to improve on as a coach. Bring them to me, because I'm going to have 5 things for you. I sometimes think, I'll just be honest here, Chris Klieman is a wonderful human being. K-State is blessed with some incredible people as their leaders. He loves his players, but sometimes there needs to be more bite to that love. You need to be a little bit harder. It would not be the end of the world if Chris Klieman came into a press conference and said, we did not play as hard as we need to play to compete at this level. And because Chris typically says, well, we played hard. No, coach, you said that at Houston. You did not. You did not. They went through the motions at key times and made critical errors, as did the coaches. I just think there needs to be better self-evaluation inside that building, whether it's at the player level, assistant coach level, trainer or manager or equipment manager level. It doesn't matter. What can I do better to help this program, help this team, help myself be better? And if one of your answers is, I'd play better if I got more NIL, get the hell out of this program. That's not the way this program is. It just doesn't have the money.
I mean, if somebody actually said, yeah, I'd play better if I got NIL, they should be off the team before they even got it out of their mouth. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
But you're right, Fitz. What you said is right. Sometimes you've got to put public pressure on people to get them to respond. They do it in the professional ranks. A lot of people are saying that college is now professional. They do it in college ranks. It's okay to say when you don't play good. It's okay to say when the effort isn't there. And I think that more times than not, you get the kind of response that you're looking for when you apply that public pressure. But there just has to be consequences. And again, it kind of goes back to what Wally's talking about, or what we've been talking about. If the roster is this good, and I do believe the roster was pretty good, but again, I could be wrong. But if the roster is this good and the guys aren't getting it done in front of them, then why aren't the other guys playing? And if it's an issue of guys can't get the playbook down or effort, well then, okay, that's a problem. But you know what? That's a culture problem. If we can't get guys to learn the playbook, or if we can't get guys to consistently give effort, that's a culture problem. Now, I'm also a person that I will stand up to anybody and say, you know what? In a locker room of 85 guys, you need 10 or 15 guys that are just complete a-holes on your football team. You do. That period, end of story. You can't have a bunch of nice guys in your locker room. You've got to have 10, a minimum of 10, but 10 to 15 guys that are just absolute a-holes in your locker room, that are going to be in trouble, that are going to cause trouble. Not get in trouble with the law. I'm not talking about that. That are just going to be mean, nasty football players, and maybe they're a jerk. Okay, fine. As long as they're not causing any problems within the locker room, then you can handle that if you've got a strong enough locker room. Kansas State needs to find some of those guys. It can't all just be hunky-dory, everybody getting along. That's not how the real world works. That's not how a real locker room works either. You could talk to any championship team. You're going to tell me everybody loves everybody in there? No, they don't. And it's okay that they don't. As long as I get maximum effort, it's all you're caring about. And if there's some money guys in there and all they care about is themselves, okay. But if they're giving the maximum effort and they're not causing any problems in the locker room, they can be as selfish as they want. Fine, be selfish, but give us everything you got in practice and give us everything you got in the game, and we'll live with the results. Kansas State needs to find some of those guys.
You know what's hilarious, and maybe it's hilariously sad here, guys, is, we keep kind of touching on some things that kind of come back to a common theme of like, goals and culture and, intensity, effort, motivation. They got a guy on staff that they're paying probably 5-figure salary, maybe north of 5-figure salary, to be a motivational speaker and to try and do and enlist some of the things that we're talking about. Maybe use that money elsewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. It's mind blowing. Look, we're all emotional after a win. We're emotional after a season that we thought was going to be better. So again, continually just a bitch about it. But at the same time, it's all the truth. It'd be one thing if we were out here just lying about what was going on or anything like that. That's not what's happening here. We're just saying, hey man, things have to change. If we want to get to where we want to go, things have to change. It's okay for things to change, man. Change isn't bad. I know people look at it that it can be bad, but it isn't. Change can be good. And Kansas State can't continue down the same path that they're going and expect to get better things. They just can't. Things have to get better.
Can I add this too, Fitz? Going back to, because I agreed with what you said earlier, Fitz, when I wasn't a huge fan of the post-game press conference last night from Chris Klieman, and not because he was angry. And honestly, I appreciated that he was respectful to the questions. He wasn't just a dickhead about answering them. I mean, he said, like, I get where some of these questions are coming from, but it's been this kind of common theme lately where he wants to say, like, essentially in a roundabout way, he keeps kind of saying, you guys are too hard on us. We're one of however many, whatever the stat is that he keeps bringing up. Was it 8 teams that have won 8 games in
the last 4 years?
The last 4 years?
8 or more. Yep.
I don't think the Kansas State fan base is saying that nobody's saying that that's like a bad thing.
Nope.
I think we all understand how great that is, as Big B has pointed out a number of times already this morning. Like, nobody's saying, everybody still believes in Chris Klieman, the coach. And John Kurtz said it on, I was listening to their show this morning on 3 Mall. Like, everybody believes in Chris Kleiman's floor. We just want to see that Chris Kleiman ceiling. We want to get closer to that. And I'm going to bring up, and I hate doing this, but I'm a Memphis fan. Folks by now know me that I'm a Memphis fan. And, Memphis just beat Tulane the other night. And I was texting with some buddies, and they were like, Wally, you got to be pumped about this. This is awesome, right? And I'm like, yeah, kind of. Like, it's not where we want to be. It's still not good enough to me. And they were going, well, Wally, you guys were 9-2 coming into this game. Am I wrong? Like, you're 10-2, right? And our head coach is Ryan Silverfield. And for folks that don't know, and I'll try and wrap this up, Ryan Silverfield over the last couple of years has gone 10-2 this year at Memphis. He's gone 10-3 last year. But guys, we're tied for 3rd in the AAC this year.
Right.
We're 4th in the AAC last year. And it's kind of going back to the K-State thing this year. It's like, well, yeah, we won 8 games, but like, from a Memphis perspective, we're watching Cincinnati get in the Big 12 and hang around and be competitive. We're watching Houston knock off K-State. We're watching, UCF kind of falling off a cliff, but we're watching other teams elevate. Look at freaking SMU. Memphis is going 10-2 is not good enough because we're seeing what everybody else is doing. K-State fans are tired of watching, other teams get their chance. We want 2022 to be more normalized. Not every decade. We want it to be every 5 years, every 4 years. So I think the problem with why fans are so hot about this season is that maybe the expectations were too high. And that's part of what Chris Klieman is probably saying is, you guys were expecting us to go 11-1 or 12-0, and that's not this team. But also, a lot of the things that we expected with a young team would be that they're getting better as the year goes on. This team got worse as the year went on. Your young guys should be getting better. There should be improvement as the year goes on. And yet that's why this year 8 wins didn't feel good. That's why K-State fans are pissed with 8 wins. Is not because we expect to win a national title, but 8 wins is 7 and 8 has constantly been the bar at K-State. We want a little bit more. And if you're only going to have 8 wins, let it be 8 wins, but we're trending up. This team is trending down. And in the age of the portal, and with the way that this team and this program kind of has attacked the portal lately, there just hasn't been a lot of reason, I think, why fans should be, hopeful entering the holiday season. I think that is where there's the disconnect Fitz between Chris Klieman right now and the fan base.
I got to get to a few things over here in the chat, some super chats. K-Net, I'm sorry, I'm not going to get everything up you put in there. I think this is an interesting point. You're now a professional, semi-pro. Should you be paying for private coaching? That's up to the player. Well, whatever. You should be getting what you need from your coaches. But if you're not, for example, maybe there's a speed coach that you want to go to and you're not getting that kind of.
Now that's different.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, if they want to, I guess they technically can, Fitz.
Yep.
I mean, because you see quarterbacks do it all the time in the summertime. They go to quarterback gurus. I thought you meant like during the season or the spring or something like that. I'm like, no, you can't do that. But in the summer, if you want to go to a position coach that specifically deals with offensive line technique and footwork and hand placement, by all means, go do it. I'm sure there's an old NFL guy that retired NFL guys that'll take some money to help college players that'll say, hey, you know what? Come here. I'll teach you what you need to know. And I'm sure there's plenty of those guys running around, plenty of speed guys like you're talking to running around. So, yeah, I don't think it should be a requirement, but I mean, you are right. If the guys are getting paid and you're wanting to master your craft, Fitz, it's a good idea.
Here's an interesting point from Byron. I'm personally investing in this team every month, so they work for me and owe me some level of accountability. Prove me wrong. I don't disagree with him. Players, you started taking money for performance. There's some absurd amounts of money going around right now, and not necessarily in football, but the whole world of college sports has changed. They're about to go basically on salary with revenue sharing because of the court case. If you're getting paid to do something beyond like a scholarship and meals, you're going to be held accountable at that level. And I understand these kids work their asses off. Big B can tell you it ain't easy.
So does the fireman, though, Fitz.
Yep. You got it. Here's where Chris Kleiman's comments after the game was a disconnect for me. You went 1-3 in your last 4. It wasn't the 8-4. It was the realization that at 7-1, the team got worse.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Because there's no way around it. You got worse.
That's right.
And you could see it kind of coming. It was almost like a slow unwind. And I thought when they got to Houston, they'd say, okay, we got an off week. Let's go. We're going to play well. No, they didn't. It just got worse. They played so well at Colorado, less so at West Virginia, less so against Kansas, and barely got by in that game. They just caught the very front end of Kansas waking up, and they got by with it. And then they just stunk at Houston. And they come home and they look uninspired against an Arizona State team who honestly does that to everyone. They just kind of suck the life out of you. I don't know how they do it, but Kenny Dillingham's got something going there. And then this. I think they played hard. They didn't play very well.
Yeah.
And that goes back to coaching for me. I just everyone needs to hold themselves accountable, including me. As I mentioned, I think I oversold Avery. You look at his stats, actually, it's not bad. It really isn't. But sometimes the timely turnovers have been really the biggest issue, and letting those impact you in a negative way. I think he recognized it himself that happened at BYU.
Yeah.
No, someone's asking, was this a Bruce Rubber post-game press conference or post season. No, that will never be matched. But yeah, I mean, fans are literally invested in this team. They're literally helping pay the players, and not through donate to the Aaron Fund and all that. This comes with the new world, and I expect coaches over the next 2-3 years, as we get into more changes, they're going to be gone. They're just look. Some of these guys are getting paid $5, $6, $7, $8 million a year. I'll put in another year or two, stock it away, and just live. Coaching isn't the same at the collegiate level. And honestly, covering it isn't the same at the collegiate level now.
Yeah.
Being an analyst, an observer, a reporter, whatever you want to say we are, it's much different now. They're young, they're kids, they're learning, and they're getting paid. I don't feel bad about criticizing them, but at the end of the day, the coaches are the ones who are accountable for the product on the field. You're the one who's supposed to get the players ready. And if you're putting players out on the field who aren't ready, well, they shouldn't be on the field, or that's an indictment on you because you have no one else to put out there that might be ready and might be adequate. Can't let it slide. You got to take care of it and clean it up. Guys, we're at an hour. I can keep going. I don't know. You know me in an hour. That's kind of my golden hour. But I think we have, we got 1,600 people in here now. I think we've got more we can probably say.
Keep it rocking.
Let's see.
I got to dip out, but I just stopped with this. And you guys please keep going, because I think this is good talk here. I was obviously a football player at Kansas State, and I was a guy that got into this industry, and I hated bashing kids. I hated doing it because I looked at it from a player's perspective and that they were just kids. Well, times have changed, and I have to change with it. I've been so reluctant to do that because I know what it's like for somebody to say something bad about you, and I'm not a professional. And while kids are, I still am not going to call them professionals, but you are being paid to do this. And if you're being paid to do this, whether I want to call them professionals or not, then the criticism's got to come with it, and we got to hold everybody within the program responsible for what happened to the program. Just like Fitz said, after we were 7-1, we were 7-1. And it's like, okay, we got a chance here. And it went in the toilet after that, just literally in the toilet. And we got to hold the people responsible for that. We just do, and that's players, that's coaches. You could even blame us fans, all of us. We got to take some initiative here. But if we don't make the proper changes, guys, I'm just telling you, it isn't going to get any better. It's just not. I know me and Wally are on the same page when it comes to that. And I know, Fitz, you're on the same page too. If you're not going to make the changes with your roster, recruit guys and bring the best players in, because this is what the best programs do. They just go get the guys. They go get the guys, and then they figure it out once they get here. But you know what's required with that? Good coaching. Good coaching just says, hey, man, give me the players. We'll figure it out. We'll write it up in the dirt if we have to. We'll just figure it out. Kansas State needs to be more like that. You can't just make guys conform to your system and what you're trying to do. So I apologize for being so negative. I'm just frustrated because I know they could be better. I just know that they could be better. And I don't want fans to get into the complacency of, well, 8 wins is fine. No, it's not fine. I'm not saying it's a failure, but 8 wins is not fine. It's just not. It's not.
Not when you're being told, by people close to the program, we're really talented, we're really deep, we're really good.
Yeah.
And then we see this. Big B, I appreciate you taking time this morning. Yep. I'm glad you're recovering from that knife fight in Tijuana.
I'm better. I'm getting better.
Should have seen the other guy. That guy's doing much worse than Big B. You're the best. K-State's lucky to have you around because you speaketh the trutheth very often.
Appreciate you, man. Thank you, guys. And I will catch you. I'm sure we'll be on tomorrow, so I will talk to you soon.
Yep. He'll be back with the Big 12 Insiders all week long. Make sure you check that out. He'll have plenty to say. Wally,
Yeah, Fitz, I'm the pessimist, and I think I was the one saying like 9-3 should be the bar, and I'm usually the pessimist here. So,
Yep. I'm kind of to the point now where I don't quite grasp why K-State's having these issues. You look at Arizona State, they went out and found a running back whose only offer out of high school was D2 Sacramento State.
Mm-hmm.
They moved up to FCS. And the kid might be on my Heisman ballot because he plays so freaking hard.
Right.
And I sometimes feel that's what K-State's missing, is that kid that plays so hard he shows up his teammates. This generation wants to show up people by talking trash. Show up and work harder, play harder, and be tougher than everyone else. That's the greatest insult to someone. And it drags everyone else on your roster up. And then be willing to bark at them. Let's be blunt. K-State has a bunch of really nice kids on this team, and I don't see many of them probably chewing ass with their teammates or have the credibility to do the chewing.
Right. Well, and again, we go back. It feels like we're going insane here. We're talking kind of about the same stuff. It's like I think some of those guys exist on this K-State roster, Fitz, but for one reason or another, it's like the coaches or other players won't stand up and say, man, pull the ripcord and get this guy either off the field or off the team. Like there are guys, I think, that are Cam Scatterbo like that will ride and die for this program and will leave it all out on the field. And, but it's like I think that this goes back to what you were saying earlier about Chris Klieman is I think if there is one fault about Chris Klieman, it's his loyalty. It's his belief in a guy that they will get it turned around. They will figure this out. I got to give them the chance to do it. And maybe sometimes you just need to pull the ripcord and know that this isn't working and this isn't helping everybody else by having this player or this coach, continue to either stick around or maybe it's just continuing their role. Maybe it's just shifting something a little bit. I mean, hell, look at what happened when they brought Connor Riley from the booth downstairs. Maybe it's just something that's just a little tweak. And for whatever reason, it just feels like this. And again, this isn't even just a this year problem. It's kind of something that's been going on a little bit.
I agree. Some interesting comments here about, how some of the kids played. But I think the one everyone wants to talk about is Avery.
Yeah.
Whatever the source of the issue is, whether it's play calling, coaching, pressure from outside forces, inside forces, this kid's a dual threat quarterback. To make him anything other than a dual threat quarterback is malpractice. He simply doesn't have the arm strength and the ability to read defenses to be a pocket passer. This experiment of trying to protect him and keep him in the pocket was an utter disaster.
Mm-hmm.
You got to let him be him.
Yeah.
And if you can't take the hits, you better have your number 2 guy ready.
Right.
Because you're going to get hit in football. Hell, he got hit last night in one of the dirtiest plays of the season, I think. And Kevin Marr and his refs just looked away and didn't call a personal foul roughing the quarterback when they spiked him into the ground with all of the body weight of a defensive lineman.
Right.
Yeah, you're hurt. I get it. I understand. And I understand, your body gets beat up as you go.
Yeah.
But he's a dual threat quarterback. And to ever decide, well, we're not going to let him run at all. You got away with it at West Virginia because they weren't very good. But you don't get away with it every time. And then once you show it, defenses know.
Yeah. I do think that some of him, like staying in the pocket, for instance, last night, does go back to some of his health. He didn't look 100% last night. I know there were times, Cincinnati where he looked a little bit more himself, and maybe even Arizona State, and we were hearing like he's as healthy as he's been since pre-Colorado or whatever. I still don't know if I buy it. So there is that in terms of him, like, not using the whole dual threat that is Avery Johnson. But the other thing that I've saw as the season went on, and, as a fan, I think it's easy to point the finger at Avery and be like, you got to keep your head up and you got to, motivate the guys and stuff. But I get the feeling as the season wore on that it was like a horror show for Avery Johnson. Like, it was like he would come off and they're about to get the ball back. And it's like, well, I know, here we go again. Like, what was the game, Fitz, where they go out and at the goal line situation a couple weeks ago where they ran the same play twice?
Yeah.
Like, if you're Avery Johnson, like, you're coming off the field, like, this is the kind of stuff I got to put up with, man. And everybody sees me being the problem. Everybody sees me with my head down and stuff. But I think that wore on him, Fitz. I think over the course of the year, it was like, man, like, I am not being put in the right situation. This offense is not being put in the right situation. And he'd make with it what he could, and he'd make some bad throws. We're not here saying Avery was perfect. Avery made bad throws last night. Avery made bad reads throughout the course of the year. He's also a sophomore. And at the same time, he didn't have an offensive line blocking for him. His receivers weren't always doing what they're supposed to do a lot. There aren't as many playmakers, and they didn't scheme to those playmakers. And so it's like, I'll go out there and I'll make do with the play that I'm supposed to run with the guys that may or may not run the right play. Like, I think over time that wore on Avery. And the other thing, Fitz, that I'll finish with is, and again, this was just something that Avery's just going to have to feel out himself, is, the one thing that I can talk about from his recruitment that, maybe we underestimated a little bit, is that adversity in terms of not winning and not always being successful is something that Avery is learning on the go right now this very year. You start to think about his mentality and his athletic prowess going back to the time that he was in middle school, elementary school, when you're talking about the Wichita Bears that never lost. They lost one game for like 3 years. Then he goes to Mays, played, I think, a little bit as a freshman, but I know he started varsity as a sophomore, his entire sophomore year. And I think they lost like 1 or 2 games his sophomore year. Junior and senior year, they're in the state championship, and they lost to Mill Valley, was like their only loss of the season, maybe Derby here and there. He's not used to losing. He's not used to guys like not being bought in. Like, he hasn't had to be the motivator all the time, because he's had guys around him that like know their role and the teams are successful. He's learning how to lose as it happens. And maybe he hasn't handled that gracefully, but it's also new to him. And he's also dealing with, again, a lot of new things, an offensive line that's brand new, a play caller that's brand new, a lot of wide receivers that he hadn't had a connection with, like with Cephas. He's learning it with J-Jack. He's learning it with Spivey a little bit more. He had it with Jace, and I think maybe Keegan. But all those things boil up to what goes back to what you were saying, Fitz, is, yeah, there's reasons why Avery wasn't the Avery that we thought. And also, I think there's reasons why fans are criticizing Avery for his demeanor and all these things, when, again, at the end of the day, I just feel like at the end of last night, he looked deflated at what this offense was supposed to be, what it wasn't, what it isn't, the guys around him not being. Him and Dylan Edwards have known each other since elementary school. And for them to be off on the very first page play of the game says a lot about, like, just the mess of chemistry that is this team this year. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I answered any of that, but it's just a lot. There's a lot going on for Avery right now. And I think he was definitely defeated by the end of this season. And I think he's upset at himself. He's upset at just the situation. I think he really likes Connor Riley, the person. I think if you asked Avery Johnson and anybody else, they love Connor Riley, the person. But this is the risk you ran when you promoted Connor Riley. Is, unfortunately, I would love to have him back as the offensive line coach. I think he's one of the best in the country. But the minute you pluck him away and say you're not the play caller anymore, if that happens, you're probably not keeping him as the offensive line coach. And if you do, that's going to be really awkward. And you better have a short list handy, because I don't think Connor Riley's sticking around that much longer after being demoted. So, yeah, there's some tough challenging, in-depth conversations are about to be had in the next week, Fitz, that, on one hand, you're kind of excited to see what happens. And on the other hand, I don't envy Chris Klieman because they're just going to tear him up.
I'm all for giving people a shot, and that's what he did with Connor Riley. I'm going to trust him to call plays. But if it doesn't work, you got to also hold them accountable. I mean, I'm really fearful of Connor leaving because so much of the success Kansas State football's had under Chris Klieman has been Connor Riley in the offensive line. And that changed this year. It wasn't just that Cooper Beebe and some other really good dudes moved on. Cooper Beebe's impossible to replace, let's be honest. But it's almost like he was distracted. It's almost like he had too many things going on to pay attention to all the details he normally hit.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's trying to scheme for an entire offense and coach an entire offensive line. Some places have a coach for tight ends and tackles and a coach for the interior three. He's got 5 positions. 5 positions he's got to coach. Now, granted, he has Drew Little with him, and that's helpful. But everyone has an analyst or someone in the background helping him. I mean, Tui has 1 position. Just think about it.
Right.
There's no one else on this team with a responsibility of coaching 5 positions at once. If there is, I apologize. I'm not thinking of it. They ain't running backs, they ain't receivers, they ain't tight ends. It's not quarterbacks.
Nope.
Not defensive ends, defensive tackles. Linebackers is 3 at most.
Safeties
3. And corners are it's almost as if you gave one guy the entire defensive backfield.
And
now the busiest coach, the coach that has the most players to whom he needs to pay unflinching attention, is coaching the entire offense. I don't think it worked. I think if Connor was just the play caller, he'd be better. And then when he was just the offensive line coach, he was better.
You know what else sucks about this, Fitz? And again, for folks unaware, the busy season is upon us. So I'm about to get some bags under my eyes here. Early signing day is this coming Wednesday. And so recruiting is on my mind. And this is what else sucks about, again, not like having this whole Connor Riley experiment potentially not, well, it didn't really work, but potentially like it being over, right? Where not only maybe you strip Connor of the play calling, but there is the possibility that if you do that, he moves on entirely.
He's that offer.
He's one of the best recruiters on the staff. I went back and looked and again, these are our grades as a GPC staff, and there might be other people that would disagree. But again, I think if you ask Derek Young and Drew Galloway and the guys that cover it over at On3 or the guys at Rivals over the last several years, I think they'd probably agree with us. Connor Riley's been one of the most consistent recruiters that this staff has had. And so now I'm starting to think man, you might lose him. And then, the other thing is you start thinking about when you think about some of the coaching changes that could be made or should be made, if fans are saying, well, if I had it my way, I mean, you've got Buddy Wyatt and Mike Tuiasosopo that they're up there. I don't know their exact age, Fits, but I mean, they're old guys. And I don't know if they recruit maybe the same way that they used to. But again, that kind of sucks because I think you could argue, as we have for many, many years, that they're 2 of the better developmental guys on this staff. But you know what I mean? There's a lot of push come to shove kind of moments that we're about to hit, not only from a coaching side, but with recruiting. I don't know. This is going to be very interesting month of December, and they've got to figure it out, quick. Because again, you've kind of got the dress rehearsal potentially of the bowl game coming up, but also with recruiting and the transfer portal and stuff of getting guys, locked into their roles. And I don't know really what the answer is, but yeah, we're getting to a point where, recruiting's got to be maybe more important than it has been. And you've got to figure out, again, like you said, Fitz, strategically and whatever, who can coach and maybe who needs some help, right? That analyst role that you were talking about, maybe 45 minutes ago or whatever, getting somebody in there that can help some of the coaches that maybe you bring on that are more stud recruiters and maybe give them some more fine tuning and stuff like that. They've got to look big picture at this staff. They did it with Clint Brown. I think the recruiting and the roster management stuff has drastically improved in the course of 2 to 3 years. So we know that they're willing to do it, but now they've got to do it at a more expansive level with, the 9, 11 coaches that are quote on the field or whatever.
I agree with all that. I'm interested to see what happens this offseason, but folks, it's not going to be tomorrow. They are solely focused on recruiting and managing the portal right now. Nothing's going to distract them from that, because if they do, they're going to be screwed up next year too. Maybe changes will happen before the bowl game. I doubt it. That's not exactly Chris Klieman's way. Maybe it should be. I'm just saying I don't see him doing that. I see him doing things after the game, or unless something's just glaring. Unless there's something that's been eating at him all season long, and he doesn't share that publicly, and he goes in and takes care of it. I don't know. But this 8-win season is disappointing because it should have been more. It's not an 8-win season where you're West Virginia and you're picked for last in the Big 12, and in 2023 you win 8 games. That's incredible. This is your Kansas State. You're picked to be in the Big 12 championship game, which requires a record of about 10-2. That's the expectations. You're always matched against expectations, not necessarily reality.
Right.
And this is the downfall of being a good coach that's had success. Now you're measured against your expectations that you've built for the fan base. And are some fans unreasonable? Yeah. Do some guys in the media screw up and say a kid's going to walk on water? Yeah.
Yeah, we've all been there.
Yeah. I will be fascinated to see what happens this offseason. And for everyone saying don't play a bowl, no. Those practices are so valuable to the very young guys you want to see playing. They better make them the most, though.
Right.
I mean, you might as well skip a bowl if players aren't going to get better. Also, just focus on the roster and charge ahead. But you need that practice time. Avery needs that practice time. If Dylan's staying, which I think he is, he needs that practice time. If Jace stays, I'm going to be really honest here. Wally, have we been hearing about Jace Brown wanting to hit the portal?
Yes.
For 6 weeks.
Yes.
Now, if he goes, don't be surprised, folks. But if he stays, I feel like that says something about someone is asserting themselves and answering questions honestly and saying, we need to fix this. We are going to fix this. Because, yeah, a lot of these kids are motivated by NIL, which I understand. We all want to make more money. I'm now watching student athletes make more money than I do, and good for them.
Right.
Good for them. But if they can keep Jace, I'll say this. K-State has focused its NIL in-house. And I think it's been a good move to try to limit the transfers by paying the guys that have proven themselves to play, that can play. Now, there's some programs you're not going to outbid. Oregon thought Kobe Savage was twice as valuable as Kansas State. Kobe Savage was a great player. This team would have been better if they had paid Kobe Savage the money. So those decisions in the offseason are going to be huge because there is a limitation of resources. This limitation for Kansas State, I'm going to look in the camera right now and say this so for all 1,866 people currently viewing can hear. Kansas State is in a staggering financial issue right now. People are paying to the NIL, which is fantastic. They're paying a lot to basketball, which is fantastic. That money isn't going into the athletic department now. There is a limit of resources at Kansas State because of the donor base, the school. There aren't doctors and lawyers just rolling out. There's engineers who make pretty good money, ag people who, work their ass off. And, it's just not the kind of population in this Kansas State family.
Right.
You got to be really smart with your resources, whether it's the athletic department or managing an NIL in the football program. I think we agree that they need to do some serious soul searching. I hope they do. And we'll see what comes of it. Something will come of it. But don't expect Chris Klieman to have a big press conference. Well, I fired this guy. We're going to do this. That's not him. He's never going to go show up someone. It's going to be quiet, handled, and you may not know about it.
Well, and the other elephant in the room here, and you can say that it's shady business or what have you, but I would be real surprised. In fact, again, from a recruiting standpoint, it would be pretty dumb to make a change before Wednesday and risk somebody in this class moving on. And that's not pinpointing anybody in particular, so don't take that the wrong way. But I mean, again, maybe that's the shady part of the business is you wait until after a kid is signed and then you make some staff moves, but it's the business. And it would be pretty dumb to come out and say, we're going to fire this guy will not be back, this guy will not be back. And now you've got those kids that were committed to your program, committed to said coaches that 48, 72 hours before signing day, they're left without a position coach that they're signing on with. So the odds of that happening, let's just get that out of the way, Fitz, are very, very, very slim that we will see any kind of changes here before Wednesday, maybe even this week. So let's just get that out of the way. And to your point, I don't think there's going to be any kind of press conference, even about just like end of the year press conference coming up anytime soon, because they're in a dogfight right now with a 5-star tight end that they better get locked up out in Goodland, Kansas, that would drastically help this offense. So I think right now that becomes priority one for many of the guys on staff from a recruiting angle. And then, over the course of the next week, you leave a guy like Clint Brown, guys like Taylor Bratt to, have some of those meetings with the guys that are in-house and try and get a better idea of who's bought in, who's going to stick around, and who might be looking out the door, so that they can trim the fat a little bit and they can have an idea and a strategy for a week from today when the portal opens of who exactly and what exactly they're going to need.
Agreed. Give us your Lincoln Cure update. I know it's Sunday and you haven't had a chance to talk to anyone about his trip to Oregon, but what's your gut tell you?
Mike, I mean, like the immediate reaction, knowing what K-State did last night and what Oregon did yesterday, is that that old Mad Men gif of "not great, Bob." But here's what I'll say, and I've been saying this for a long time: is I think now that he's taken the visit to Eugene, it would not stun me or shock me necessarily if he were to flip. But at the same time, I think it would be very out of character for him to do it, because at the end of the day, when you go back to what led him to Kansas State in the first place, it was an emotional decision. Lincoln talks about crying with Chris Klieman sitting in the seat that he grew up watching K-State, in that empty stadium, knowing like this is the spot, right? That even if Connor Riley moves on, you would assume that Matt Wells will stick around. You would assume that Chris Klieman is still going to have an offense that's going to feature tight ends, because even if they wanted to kind of switch things up in their offensive scheme, it's going to take some years, and they've got a pretty damn good tight end room right now that why would you waste it anyway? So point being, the tight ends aren't going anywhere at Kansas State. Mm-hmm. They're going to be a feature. So I think Lincoln knows that. He's got the entire community of Goodland. It's a hell of a lot closer than Eugene. It's a locker room that I think he knows that he fits in. He knows that. I've heard it. I spent a day in his house the day that he committed. Like I've heard it from enough people that I think deep down they know that it's the easier transition for him to make. And historically, even outside of Lincoln, ask Chris Harper, it's an easier transition for a kid to make. And Chris Harper grew up in the suburbs of Wichita, not on a farm in Western Kansas. All this to say, I think that when he goes to sleep at night, if it's the night before signing day and he's still thinking about it, I think he's going to find himself thinking, I really love Dan Lanning. He might even say, I like Dan Lanning more than anybody on K-State staff. That's a possibility. He's shown that he has that level of relationship with some of the guys up at Oregon. But I just feel like at the end of the day, if emotional heartstrings was what tugged you to Kansas State in the first place, I find it hard to believe that he would just cut those off and flip and do that to Kansas State the week of. I think, and again, Oregon's already gone out and they've got another tight end, a very quality tight end, 4-star guy in this class. They just committed, excuse me, they just had the number 1 tight end in the country or number 2 tight end in the country for 2026 commit to them next year. He's already on board. So I just have a hard time believing that when push comes to shove and you start doing the pros and cons, Fitz, that Lincoln just goes, you know what, I just got to go with what I initially thought and go with my heart and go with Kansas State. That's what I think. I've covered recruiting. You and I've done this long enough to know that crazy crap happens. But my gut still says I'm not switching my crystal ball at this moment. But I also need to check in with him and with some other folks first after the Eugene trip.
No doubt. Look, I want to be really honest with everyone. No one player is going to make or break this program. I mean, he's a really talented kid. He's an incredible athlete. He belongs at Kansas State, but he's also a kid. And thank you, Daphne. He's going to think with emotions a little bit. So if he flips, he flips. Okay. Dylan Edwards did it twice last year. We all got pissed off, and guess where he's at now?
Right.
Where he should have been. But sometimes a kid needs to realize that himself. He needs to learn that for himself. I'm just going to be honest. He's going to be miserable in Eugene, Oregon. I would be miserable in Eugene, Oregon. I've had so many people tell me, oh, you think Boulder's weird. People from Boulder think Eugene's weird. That it's so far out there. It's just so different culturally than what we have in Kansas. I do. I just honestly believe if he makes a decision, he's not going to be happy. He might be happy in the football complex, but you have a lot of life on campus and with non-football people. I'm not sure he'd be happy. Chris Harper said it when he came back. Yep. I gave it a shot. It just didn't work for me. That's not what I want to do. And I think it's an important lesson to learn, but you know what? I was this way. You were probably this way, viewer. Sometimes as a kid, when you're 17, 18, 19, you got to learn crap for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You got to touch the stove when it's hot. You just have to. And then you know better. Kids make mistakes. Coaches make mistakes. We certainly make mistakes. But do you strive to improve yourself? That's really the question. And Wally, I know Chris Klieman. A lot of what we've seen him be emotional this year. I think there's a lot of stuff going on, but this is eating at him. And a big part of it is this team, that the plan he laid out for this team didn't work as well as expected, whether it was coaching, strategy, play calling, recruiting, transfer portal. I don't know. I don't know what's in his head. Like, I should have gotten this kid. I should have brought this kid in. I should have done this or that. I don't know those things. But in looking at his demeanor, he is eating himself alive with doubts and things he knows he needs to change and really doesn't want to do it. But by God, people, if I see one more comment, he's not going to fire anyone. He did it to his best friend, Courtney Messingham. I don't know what more proof you need to do to know that he's willing to make really tough effing decisions than that.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes when you're a business owner or a coach or anything, you got to make those decisions. I love you, but this time is over. It's time to move on. And trust me when I say this, it's not easy, but sometimes you have to do it.
Yep. Agreed.
We appreciate everyone watching. We almost made it to 2K. I was trying to get there, Wally, but after 90 minutes plus, I think we're going to call it good. Folks, we got so much cooking. We're going to be back with the Powercat podcast and all that good stuff this week. Wednesday's a big day. It's signing day. Time to shift your focus. We'll start to get inclinations on bowl destinations, although that doesn't happen until a week from today.
Yep.
Stay tuned.
Transfer portal's coming. Yeah.
Yep. Portal's coming. And oh yeah, I should have mentioned this an hour and a half ago. We have 75% off right now at Go Powercat. If you enjoyed this, if you enjoy our YouTube content, you enjoy everything you see from us that's free, why don't you come behind the paywall? We're going to start doing, I think we're going to start hitting up with some more recruiting podcasts and those type of things, which really feed the beasts. And also, well, we've got some changes coming, but you'll learn about that later. We appreciate everyone watching. Just hold yourself accountable, whether you're watching this or me or anyone else. Hold yourself accountable and make tough changes if they need to be made. I've learned that the hard way, and I fired people that were friends because they weren't a good person to have in my life for my current circumstances. Not easy, but sometimes it needs to happen. We appreciate your support, appreciate you watching, and as Jerome Tang would say, go Cats.
This has been a GoPowerCat.com and Spirit Street production. Please support this show by subscribing to this YouTube channel or follow us on your favorite podcast platform.